Hi, thank you for joining me in this second episode of the day, second episode of the week so far. This is Saturday. Um, I want to talk about nuances and my interest in film and TV. I say TV just simply because before I've been interested in either one. Well, both. I've been interested in both since I was a little child, and I would watch film movies on TV before the earliest movie I recall seeing in the movie theater, which was Return of the Jedi, made a big imprint on me, I can tell. Um, so I linked the two of them together. I don't just say movies or film because I remember the all those hours spent watching television, and I have grown up. It's been difficult sometimes because it seems like I'm unique. When I talk with other people, they don't seem to have the same enjoyment. They don't seem to have the same deep, abiding love for television and film that I do. So that's what makes things difficult. Relating, I don't want to say relating to others, but I mean, there's that chasm in terms of one of my passions. There are a lot of passions that I have where they're chasms where other people I know don't share those passions. It's unfortunate. But all right, so I'll just say movies and TV. When I say movies, I mean both. All right. So I think inherently we there's a for those of you who know computing and computer programming, you may know that there's a kernel and then there's shells built upon the kernel, as I understand it. Well, I think that our minds don't think in terms of language or words inherently. I think it's very difficult when you uh, come up with an impression of something and then you have to translate it into words. I think that impression is more like this kernel, and the language is placed on top of it as a shell. Um, I'm interested in Kabbalah quite a bit, and there's a part in the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life has is great because it's a video. I can show you visually. At the top, there's what's called Keter, and there are variations of that word, which three variations of that word, but basically it's at the top. I'll call it the crown, and then at the bottom, its counterpart is Malkut, which means kingdom, um, and there is a sequence of trees of life in Kabbalah. It's part of Judaism. Um, the and the bottom, the Malkut, the kingdom of one, um, acts as also the functions as the Keter, if I have this right, Keter of the following tree, and then each tree is organized the same way. It's just that there's a sequence of these, and Keter at one tree is actually the Malkut, the bottom of the tree above it or before it. And so, anyway, within this tree of life, there are containers or vessels called sephirot. Sephirah is singular, and there's a network. There are three sephirot in a left and a right column, and the keter is at the top, and then there are network lines that go like that, and there are two on either side, and then beneath that there are two on either side, and then two on either side here, with one in the middle, and this is considered the heart. The keter is considered the head, and there are network lines in these bottom two. There are network lines crisscrossing so that it's a network of connecting lines, and so there are 10 sephirot. And then beneath that, of course, they go down to a sephirah, and then that leads down to a final Sephiroth, which is Malkut, which also functions as the Sephiroth, the Keter, at the top of the next tree, and it's essentially light as energy. Think of it as energy, or as like a bloodstream. It's light flowing through this entire network. Anyway, Kabbalah deals with nuance and deeper meaning. Um, Deeper meanings that I believe, that's the whole point of this video. I'm saying deeper meanings aren't expressed a lot in our common interactions with each other, but I think they should, and I think it's deeply something that's underappreciated and underacknowledged. There's another theory that I'm fascinated by, which is Dramatica. It's a pyramid of, not a pyramid, it's a periodic table of 4 levels, and at the top level, if you look at bird's eye view, there are 4 units. It's quadrants, and then on the second level, beneath each of those units, there's a quad of 4, and then beneath each of those units, it's a quad of 4, and so forth. There are 4 levels, and Dramatica is a theory about how the mind is dealing with a problem, not necessarily solving a problem, but just working its way through a conflict. Even its own theory, it says problem is more male-centered, and I forget what the female version, but it's the same thing. It's just men label it or think of it in terms of problem and solution, and women, forget what the women's version is. Something, it deals with how men, there's a linear way of looking at it and a holistic way of looking at it, and holistic is more spatially oriented, and linear is more, well, segment oriented and cause and effect oriented. But it's the same thing. It's just how 2 genders interpret it instinctively. But anyway, it's the same periodic table, and it's the mind working its way through a problem, and the mind, I guess, instinctively, or the theory, so the theory says, instinctively imagines it in 4 different perspectives. There's the I perspective, which would be the audience's view. It's the main character point of view. That's the function of the main character in a story. So a story is really the mind working its way through a problem, exploring different aspects of the conflict. I'll just keep saying problem because I'm a man, and it just instinctively I think of it as a problem. A conflict. And let me see, wait a minute, where was I? Oh, the main character is the I point of view into the I perspective, and there's the obstacle character, which is not an adversary, it's not an antagonist. That's a whole different perspective. This is an opposing way of going about something. It's a confrontation with an opposing way. That's why many times in movies there's like a relationship story. There's a whole massive storyline. Many of you know I really need an example. Okay, many of you probably know Jaws. You can, if you haven't seen Jaws, you can at least understand what Jaws is about. It's about a shark, and the dilemma, the conflict is that there's the shark eating, chomping people, and so the main character is I believe he's a sheriff, and so the objective there are 4 perspectives, or what it calls 4 through lines. There's the objective through line, there's the main character through line, there's the impact character through line, and there's a subjective character through line, or subjective story through line. The objective story through line, the subjective story through line, the main character through line, and the impact character through line. Okay, there are the 4. And so the shark creating a problem for tourists and people on the beach, and antagonist is a shark, because without the shark doing what it's doing, there will be no conflict. Everybody's happy. And I think he's a sheriff. the sheriff acting as the one trying to pursue the goal of getting rid of the shark and eliminating the problem. That's him acting as protagonist. And you have these different characters. Sorry, you have these different characters. That's the objective story. It's not that emotional. I mean, there are themes in it, but it's not as emotional as some of the other perspectives. Simply, it's like a chess scenario. You can think of it. I guess you can think of this as in terms of scenarios. The scenario is there's a shark biting people, chomping people, and there's a sheriff pursuing the goal of stopping the shark, and there's a mayor who doesn't want word or news to get out that there's a shark creating a danger, creating a hazard, creating a sense of threat, and and then there are two experienced people who are helping the pursuit, not necessarily personally helping the sheriff, but helping the pursuit of the goal of stopping the shark. Okay, so that's very objective, not much emotional context. It's the chessboard level of looking at things. That's the objective story. The main character doesn't deal with that. The main character is, sheriff, or police chief. He's not sheriff, he's police chief, Brody, and he has this fear of water, and that's him personally, and he has to overcome this. And he does at the end. He's forced by the circumstances in the objective story to have to overcome it. But there's a personal development, a personal arc in his, I guess you could call it pursuit. There's a personal journey towards becoming better or resolving his fear of the water. That has nothing to do with, really not directly related to the shark threat. And that's the eye perspective. You are following it through this person's eyes. And then there's an impact character, and I'm trying to remember who the impact character. In Dramatica, they determined that the impact character is a combination of Hooper. Is it Hooperman or Hooper? The shark hunting expert and the shark hunter. This is not a good example of an impact character, but I will give but all right. You have the main character perspective or through line and the objective story through line. The subjective story through line would relate to the evolution of the relationships amongst these several different characters. So there's the objective and subjective. In terms of the story itself evolving, all the characters involved, you have like an emotional development and you have an intellectual development. The intellectual development is trying to stop the shark, and the emotional development, I don't know what it is, but it would be these relationships amongst these different characters evolving, some for the good, some for the bad. I can explain it in terms of Back to the Future. There's the main character, which would be Marty, because you seem to be following the story through his eyes, and you know more about his character than any of the other characters. And the impact character there is not the romance or whatever with his mother and so forth. The impact character is George, his father. So when he goes back in time, he is making an impact upon, well, technically, his father is making an impact upon him because of the way his father is, and it's not good. And so what his father is struggling through, because each of the four through lines has itself a problem or a conflict at four different levels of resolution. That's why it's four different levels. And so while he's struggling through that struggle itself is making an impact on Marty as the main character. We're not experiencing it through George's eyes, we're experiencing it through Marty's eyes as the main character. So that makes an impact on him. Sometimes the main character, I'm going too much off into Dramatica. Sorry, I'll make this short. Marty, sometimes the main character will force the impact character to change simply through impact, and sometimes the impact character will impact upon the main character to change. Either one. If the main character does not change, the impact character must change because I should mention this. I don't want to skip over this because Dramatica is saying these are not individual characters, and you really want to get into the individual characters and explore their fascinating personalities and so forth. That's not, as Dramatica says, that's not what film is doing or a story is doing. It's the mind of the writer um, developing a scenario and putting forth an argument. It's saying it's like, people say, what's the theme, what's the message of the story, what's the point of the movie, and so forth. What's the movie arguing for? It's that if you believe in yourself, Back to the Future, something like if you believe in yourself, da 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 da, then you will overcome bullying and become better, or become a better person, something like that. I'll have to check through, but you get messages like that. So that's what the movie is trying to say, and it's using these different characters through these four different perspectives to demonstrate that. So these aren't real people that you get into, and it's good to develop characters, but and flesh them out, but it's not that there are different characters with personalities and that's it. It's that the mind is trying to argue for something, hopefully a better way of life, or point out some aspect in society, give you insight into something through the interactions of these characters and what develops as the four through lines arc and develop. So that's what I'm getting at. It's that our minds, I suspect, inherently deal at their core terms of imagery. When you have certain instincts, and when I know for my own sake, at least sometimes I've wanted to say something to, no, now don't get me wrong, like don't misjudge me, whatever. I'm being honest. When I'm talking with somebody, sometimes, like hypothetically, I could say, "Oh, could I stay later?" Or that was a nice. I could come in and I could say, "Oh, that was a nice thing you said yesterday." In my head, I'm saying that verbally, but in my head, I'm thinking, there's so much I want to tell you about how it impacted on me, or I'm going through a rough time, and could we just sit down and chat and stuff. Movies do this a lot. That's what's called subtext, where there's a surface layer thing, a statement that's given, but there are nuances, and sadly, I hope audiences now are just as aware of nuance as previous audiences have been. And watching some of these first reactions to movies like Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and so forth, I'm beginning to be concerned. Maybe it's just because it's their first time seeing a movie, but like for example, well, anyway, I'll finish my statement and then I'll go use the Empire Strikes Back as an example. So there are these subtextual thoughts that you want to express, you're definitely thinking, but you're restricting yourself and you feel unsafe and uncertain, and maybe you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings, or maybe it's a wrong context, or maybe you feel that you should not, it's not the proper time, or maybe you may hurt the other person's feelings or whatever. You will not be so honest about what you're saying, so you say something else. That's very common. That's like part and parcel of being a screenwriter. Um, that's why many times you should read through your draft and make the statements not so obvious and on the nose. There's a term, on the nose. That's literally what it means. It means like right in front of your face, and you shouldn't do that. Or at least there's more interesting complexity if you don't do that. So anyway, in Empire Strikes Back and in Return of the Jedi, there are two prime examples. They're like pet peeve examples I have. One is there's spoiler alert if you haven't seen Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi for a few minutes. I won't spend a lot of time. Okay, starting now. In Empire Strikes Back, in the third act, in the climax, Han Solo is being taken by stormtroopers and about to be frozen, and all along, and Princess Leia says, "I love you," and Han Solo says, "I know." Now, originally that was filmed, or I don't know if it was filmed that way, but the script had him saying, "I love you" too, and it didn't seem to feel right. So Harrison Ford, the actor playing Han Solo, was instructed, from what I've read, say the first thing that comes to mind, and instead of saying "I love you too," he said, "I know," and that's the perfect line that fits. But when people watch it, they think, "Oh, how come he didn't say 'I love you' back?" Oh, and then they get this frown on their face, like, "Oh, come on, what happened to 'I love you' back?" They weren't paying attention throughout the entire movie. If you're really paying attention, that's what I mean by nuance. If you're really paying attention, you'll see there's a perfect example of steadfast and change. At the very beginning of the movie, Han Solo um, comes. Moment you see him in Empire Strikes Back, he walks in and he says, "General, I have to go back and pay. I can't stay here. I have to go pay back Jabba the Hutt." And then and he's already made eye contact with Leia, who just looks at him, doesn't smile, just looks at him, kind of with a concerned look on her face. And then he goes up to Princess Leia and he says, "Well, I guess it's something like, well, I guess it's the goodbye." And then she says nonchalantly, "Well, I guess so." And then there's a moment where he waits, and cognitively, I would think it's instinctive. People would know what he's thinking. He's thinking he wants something more from her, but he's not saying openly, "I want you to express your feeling, like, why can't you da da." Even as I say it now, it's a whole bunch. It's more like an emotion, and that's the kernel. But there are shells of language you have to put over it. Once you try and translate that instinct or that feeling into words, there's room for being lost in translation or whatever. There's room for being lost in how you express it. Maybe you don't express it anyway very well. Anyway, he says, "Well, don't get mushy on me, princess. Goodbye." And then he leaves. And then she goes after him. And that's an implication, I guess, that she really does feel for him or care about him. And he wants her to admit that she has feelings for him, and she says, "I don't know what you're talking about," and then he says, "I think you do." So throughout the rest of the movie, he's saying his argument is, "I think you really do have feelings for me, but you're afraid to express them." So in this climactic moment, he's being pulled away. He's about to be frozen. They don't know whether he's going to be killed by this process or not. And she finally said, she's been warming up. At some point, about halfway through the movie, she kisses him on the cheek. It's not a big deal, but she kisses him on the cheek, and she finally admits, "You do have your moments." So in this moment, in that was halfway through the movie. This is towards the end of the movie. She says, "I love you," and he says, "I know." And it's not he's the main character, I guess, because you seem to be following it through his point of view, and people get all lovey-dovey. I mean, I'm guessing they seem to be all lovey-dovey and her and him and love stories and so forth, and they totally miss what's going on. As the main character, he's remaining steadfast in the steadfast in being convinced that she has feelings for him and she's been hiding or repressing, and then she, as the impact character, actually changes, and he's remaining steadfast. So when she changes and she says, "I love you," that's her change, and he's remaining steadfast, and he says, "I know." It's as if he was saying, "I've known all along. Don't worry, I've known all along." All right, that's my impression of it. Then there's a moment in Return of the Jedi where um, Luke and Leia, again spoilers, Luke has discovered that um, his father is Darth Vader in the previous movie, and also that Princess Leia is his twin sister, and they were split at birth to avoid to so that both of them aren't in trouble. Hide them both away, and so that if one gets hit, then the other is safe by someone who would not know that they're both related. Okay, so anyway, he goes back and in a private moment, he reveals that Darth Vader is his father, and he's convinced he can turn Darth Vader back toward the good side of the Force. And then she's there, and then he tells her, "There's something more. You're my sister." And I don't think many people even watch. I think if they're on their phones or they're preoccupied with looking at the trees or something or other, they don't catch her facial expressions. And it's something sad about society, I think. She looks at him, puzzled, then she looks down and she looks away and she thinks for a moment, and then she says, "I know. I've always known." And I read into that. It's very clear, even as a child, like I saw this like age 6 or 7. It's very clear even then what was going on. By her saying, first of all, she looks puzzled, and then she looks away, and then she thinks for a moment. That act means that it's a surprise for her, and she's working through trying to reconcile what that means. And when she says, "I know, I've always known," she's not talking about intellectually being aware that she is, or consciously being aware that he and she are brother and sister. It's that, and I interpret it seems very clear that um, she felt feelings about him, and when she had kissed him earlier in the movie, or in the previous movie, Empire Strikes Back, and in the movie before that, Star Wars, later retitled A New Hope, that she felt something towards him. It's like it goes back to nuance. It's like intellectually, shell wise, one of the shells is, "Oh, we are brother and sister." But at a deeper level, like a kernel level, it's like we have this close bond that we feel, at least I'm feeling it, and this openness and this giving and this connection, deep, deep connection on like a heart level. And that's how I interpret it. Um, so she felt that, and that's what she meant by "I've always known." She didn't know consciously that they were brother and sister, but she felt on a subliminal level. Um, I've always felt this bond between us. So I hope I'm pretty clear in talking about nuance and subtext and how movies embody this thing that I think is natural in all of us, that we think certain things, and there's a level of judgment. There's like a restrictive gateway, and we may feel certain feelings or want to express certain things, but we judge it by a gateway or a list. We judge it. Should I express all of this, or should I express part of this, or should I say something else that kind of lets me feel a little bit better, like soothes me a little bit. So I can at least express some little bit and not all of what I really want to express. And that's why, like in a scene or in real life, somebody may say, "Oh, I'll get you a cup of coffee," and underneath they may be thinking, "Oh, I can tell you're very sad about something. How can I help?" But on a conscious level, they say, "Oh, let me get you some coffee." I hope I'm clear about that, and I think I've said all I have. It's about half an hour, so I'll let you be, and hopefully in today or tomorrow I'll upload the third video I want to do, which is about how I would develop a cult. All right, so long for now.